What does this delicate woodland flower have to teach us about boundaries, wounds, and resilience? In this video, we will explore the botanical descriptions and some species differences. We'll go over the traditional and historical usages and maybe how they align to modern methods. Of course, I go into research as well, and we'll just kind of do a deep overview of this plant. If you are interested in reading about it, I also will be posting on my blog. And I, of course, will go over some cautions and considerations and just all that fun stuff. So let's get into it with the botanical description and identification. So first off, we're going to touch on rose geranium. This is not what I have in my backyard, so I'm not going to go over the specifics of it, but I thought we should introduce it. So this is the beautiful pink flowers that you'll commonly see more ornamentally, and the Latin or scientific name is Pelargonium graveolens. So this is not actually even in the same genus. They're in the same plant family. The one we're gonna pay most attention to today is Geranium maculatum. So they also are very, very different in appearance and smell and taste. I find wild geranium very aromatic, but rose is said to be much more fragrant and it smells strongly of roses. Wild geranium or the cranesbill, this might have more of a lemony, citrusy, fresh scent. It has like a slight florally smell, but it also has like this bitter edge to it, and it kind of reminds me of motherwort and like oregano, and like that combined with maybe some lemon balm. Like that's what the smell smells like to me personally, but of course everybody's sniffer is different. So the leaves do appear a little bit differently as well. If you look at our rose geranium, it's going to have the furry, deeply lobed and serrated leaves, while our wild geranium is going to have the deeply cut, palmately lobed, and they turn this beautiful red and orange in the fall. So I've gone out and collected quite a bit of geranium leaves. They really do remind me of motherwort. Furry, I guess they're not furry, but they are quite soft. And here is a side-by-side comparing a motherwort leaf to a geranium leaf. So they have kind of that same like shape, but they are different, of course. One is a little bit more shrubby. The rose obviously would be more shrubby, whereas our geranium is going to shoot upright. It's going to have those like single flowers. They will be like close together, but it's not going to be like a shrub like our rose is. And they're both perennial. And both have a history of medicinal usages, but one has been more for aromatic usages, the rose one, of course, with that really strong rose fragrance, and then our wild geranium that's now being grown more ornamentally, but has also been used for its medicinal purposes. So why don't we get into the traditional and historical usages of both of these? So now we are really going to be honing in on the wild geranium. This is just what grows near me, and I like to focus on the local botanical stuff. So these are native to North America, and they have been used by Native Americans for a long time. So they've been used for diarrhea and open sores, and also for wounds. African tribes like Basotho, if I'm saying this right, I might butcher some of these names and terms, but Basotho, Fingos, and Zulus, they use the root for GI issues and such. So we'll see a common theme of using them for digestive issues. So after it was introduced into Europe, it started being used for more respiratory elements. There's not a lot of research behind this plant in general, to be honest, but there's not a lot of research going into the respiratory ailments. But cranesbill's been used obviously for diarrhea, dysentery, inflammation, sore throat, hemorrhages, and even eye conditions. So something that I find really interesting right now, especially if you've been following along with our Brainy Botany series, which I do this every month, we've been focusing on berries, and you can start to see the common themes within like the rose family. You can start to see, oh, that's what that's for. Oh, you know, that's common in that family. Oh my gosh, that must be a rose. Like, I hope that you start to have these aha moments as we learn about like all of the connections. And then European settlers found it actually useful for cholera and diarrhea, internal bleeding, STDs, and it's been used in similar applications. I'm wondering if there is maybe some astringent action or tannins involved in our geranium. And of course, if you haven't been following along, this month we're talking about tannins too. And I really hope that you can answer that question. If you can, put it down in the comments. So we will find that it is cooling, it is drying, and it's also like gently toning, and it is astringent. So if you answered in the comments that, you are correct. It is astringent, and that means that it likely has some tannin content in it. There's definitely wound healing. It could be applicable in ulcers. There's absolutely some mucous membrane toning potentially happening, which is another common theme that we see with like tannins and astringency. So with all of that said, I would probably recommend to be cautious if you are pregnant. This is something that's utilized post-pregnancy and postpartum. It can help to just kind of tighten things up and get you back to where you were, and also dealing with the emotional trauma. Wild versus your garden geranium, I do just want to clarify that the Pelargonium are going to be more of your ornamental type of geraniums. They will still have medicinal values, but unless you're like an aromatherapy, there is definitely confusion. You really want to make sure if you are trying to source geranium, like if you're trying to get dried herb, or if you're trying to get a tincture, or especially a tincture or anything with a blend of it, definitely double check the Latin name and just make sure it's the right species that you're looking for. Make sure that you know where you're sourcing it from. I like to be able to like see and look at the garden. If you can go out there and like actually go on site to where they make this stuff, that's even better, but not everybody has access to do that. Let's move into harvesting ethically. Obviously, harvesting ethically is another important part. So in all of my blog posts, I put a risk rating button so that you can go and see and double check if the plant is on our at-risk list. So these are things that we as ethical herbalists really want to consider. It's best to harvest in the spring and the fall. I would probably, it really depends on the tradition as well. I would say you try and think of like the energies. So for example, raspberry, we talk about how it's best to gather the leaves before it flowers, because that's where all of the energy is going to be. When it starts to flower and produce the berries, all of the energy is going into the berries. So it's said that the content, like the chemical compounds, are going to be higher when the flowers haven't flowered yet. So that's kind of, and I'm not saying that that's fully like proved by science or that's fully backed up by science. I'm just saying this is potentially anecdotal evidence that could be helpful. So like anybody that's an herbalist that sells like tea, they will put on there, this has been harvested at the best time of harvest, and that will be meaning it's when the volatile oils are the highest. And it's just like, especially, you know, dandelion is great to gather in the morning, but also it's good to gather after dew has dried up a little bit. So these are things that you think of when you are learning about an herb, and that's why it's important to kind of do it one by one. And we do it, you know, 2 per month, which is a great method as well, but it can get overwhelming. And of course, testing it out and trying your own little experiments of like, you know, I tried this on its own and I don't know, maybe I should try adding a little bit of lemon to it or a little bit of orange. So if you do get your hands on some geranium, here are some different ways you can use it. Well-known method is using it in a tea. So you can use the dried leaves and maybe try a little bit at once and kind of work your way up, see how it performs. You can try it hot. You could try it more of like a colder, an iced tea in the morning, in the evening. You can do an infusion or a decoction. A decoction is just being more careful about those compounds you're pulling. You can also do a tincture. I think that the tincture would most likely be made with the leaves, and I think it would be, I don't know, I feel like brandy actually would pair really well with geranium, but you can explore that more. The best thing, the best practices is if you're using fresh plant material, chop it up, get all of those delicious compounds out and active and extracted, and also use glycerins and stuff. And you just want to think about the taste. I don't like vodka. I don't like vodka tinctures, but like they do really good at extracting, and it's super cheap. So if you have a grain based, or if you add vodka, that's great. It just is probably not going to taste great. I find brandy to be a little bit more palatable. And you might have heard this one coming, but you can use a powder for wounds. It has that astringent action, so if you were to get a cut, you could use it very similarly to yarrow, where you kind of just put it on that cut and it will help to make sure that your blood like clots up. So you can use it in salves as well, or in like pastilles. And you could also potentially do like a topical spray for postpartum, for a gum rinse, or maybe even for a throat gargle, because of that healing potential for sore throats. So there's lots of different ways, and it does actually pair well with yarrow. It pairs well with calendula, which is another great skin healer, and plantain, which is another great first aid ally, which we talk about in another video. And we already pretty much touched on it, but I do just want to go over some cautions and precautions very, very carefully, and potential contraindications. So this is not really for prolonged usage. Anything with tannins and astringency can be irritating after long-term usage. You also want to be considerate because they are drying. If somebody is already on the dry side, it can be irritating as well. I would say it's safe for most, as long as you're not depleted and dry. And also with pregnancy, there's just not a lot of research to go into like the potential of uterine contracting, and we know with raspberries that could potentially lead to an early miscarriage. So you want to be careful with using like astringent and tannin in high amounts in pregnancy. But that said, it can be very beneficial for the very last month and when you're going into labor, because it can help to shoot that baby out. So you just want to research and be very careful and bring it to your trusted provider or herbalist, whoever that you trust with this stuff, and somebody that already knows what they're talking about. So that's just my thing. With any of these videos, it's just best not to start something without having a basic knowledge of it, and a basic knowledge of yourself is the most important part, to see how am I going to respond to this. I feel like the best applications of geranium are really when you're feeling leaky, when you're feeling either leaky in your bowel movements, in your digestion, or even in your emotions. Like if you're just feeling really leaky, if you just have a really stressful situation happen, like holes of sand like coming out of my body is my way of describing it. Thinking about it physically, spiritually, botanically, if you think about that astringent action and like how you have a wound, like this is how I feel, okay? So I have these wounds all over, maybe it's spiritually, emotionally, but like that astringent action can help plug them up. So now you know that geranium is much more than a pretty and often hidden forest flower that you might not see or might not notice or pay attention to. I invite you, if you have any stories to share, maybe about this month relating, or even just like relating to the plant, or like connections you've had, just comment below. Definitely subscribe for more of my content. Again, I post Brainy Botany monthly, and then I'll also do a free event monthly as well. Grab those resources, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Don't forget that you are loved, and peace.